Okay, so today is our second day of 8.5. So yesterday we found out that there were some cases where we couldn't use the law of sines. Remember with the law of sines that we did yesterday, we used those for non-right triangles, and you had to have some kind of angle measure pair. Like if this was 23, then the side across from it had to have something in order for us to solve. And maybe this was 16. Okay, and then we set up our law of sines. The sine of A over side A would equal the sine of B over side B, and the sine of C over side C. And we used only two at a time. Now in order for that to work, you had to have some pair. Okay, some pair that an angle and the side across from it were both given to you. But that's not always the case. So that's where our new buddy, the law of cosines, comes in. All right, so the law of cosines is for any triangle with given side lengths A, B, and C. Now let's go ahead and notice some patterns here. So first, it always starts with what? Yeah, it always starts with something squared. If I were to take away this part of it, that part just looks like what? It looks like the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so if I start with a squared, then I have b squared plus c squared. If I start with b squared, I have a squared and c squared. And if I start with c squared, I have a squared and b squared. Okay, so see how you're going to have all three variables there right at the start? And then let's look at the second one. I have subtraction in all of them. I have 2 in all of them. And then let's look at this. If this is b times c, where else do the b and c appear? Yeah, at the beginning, right here, the b and c. Okay, so see how those are going to relate? This is a and c, and look, you're multiplying a times c. And then this one here is a and b, so you have a and b. Okay, and then you have the cosine of a. So if it's the cosine of a, where else do you have the a? In the beginning. So if you have a squared, you're finding the cosine of a. If you have b squared, you're finding the cosine of b. If you have c squared, you're finding the cosine of c. Now this is your first time seeing this, so that can be a little bit overwhelming. So it really helps to be able to recognize those patterns. So noticing that, oh, I'm doing the cosine of a if I have a squared. Okay, I'm doing the cosine of b if I have b squared. I'm doing cosine of c if I have c squared. Okay, and color coding is nice too. So you can see if this is b squared, here's my b. If this is a squared, here's my a. If this is a squared, here's my a. And then whatever's here for c squared would be here. This is c squared again. And then this is your b. Okay, so now you can see what that pattern is. So what we're going to do for example 3 is use the law of cosines, and we're going to use that to find each measure. We're going to round any lengths to the nearest tenth, so that's for a length. And then angle measures, this is similar to what we did yesterday, get rounded to the nearest degree. All right, so the first thing I want you to do is look at this triangle, and I want you to say in your mind why we can't use the law of sines for that right away. No, I said in your mind, so I shouldn't hear what you're saying in your mind. Yeah, Brandon?
Because there's no corresponding sides and angles.
Okay, good. So there's no pair of corresponding sides and angles. So I'm given 110, okay, which does not have a side length across from it. And then because I have these side lengths, I don't know what this angle is, and I can't figure it out, okay, with the information given. So I'm going to have to use the law of cosines. So the first thing I usually do to make sure I'm setting everything up correctly is I'll just label what each side is. For instance, if this is y, I know that the side across from it is the lowercase y. And if this is angle x, the side across from it is the lowercase x. And then if this is z, then the side across from it is the lowercase z. Okay, so sometimes what I try to do is I try to come up with the equation right away. So see how this is your angle measure, the 110? You're trying to find xz, so what you're trying to find is your y. So when I set up my equation, I can use y squared equals, so if I have y, x, and z, this is going to be x squared plus z squared minus 2. Now, based on our pattern above, what am I going to multiply by 2? Oh, good. And then it'll be the cosine of which angle? Y. Okay, so now I can plug in what I know. So for y squared, that's what I'm trying to solve for. That's an unknown. X is going to be 30 squared. This will be 35 squared minus 2 times 30 times 35 times the cosine of 110 degrees. Okay, now some of these we can do in our head, like 30 squared we know is going to be what? 900, because 3 squared is 9, right? So you can know that's 900. So if we do 35 squared, we get 1225 minus, and then I would do 2 times 35 first. What's 2 times 35? 70. So when you do 70 times 30, do 7 times 3, which is 21. So then it'll just be 2100 because you had 2 zeros. Okay, and that'll be the cosine of 110. Now you have to do your order of operations. You cannot subtract these because with order of operations, what comes before addition and subtraction? Multiplication. So you'd have to multiply those together first. Okay, now you can add these two together to get your 2125. And then we're going to minus, and let's do the 2100 times the cosine of 110. Okay, which is negative 718, put 0.24, and I'm just going to put dot, dot, dot. You do not want to round until the very end. So what that means is I'm going to keep that value in my calculator, and I'm going to use my second answer button. Okay, so for the 2125, I could do minus second answer, and that would give me the 200 or 2,843.24, and I'm just going to put the dot, dot, dot. That shows that I have it rounded.
What's the second answer? Wait, what did you say?
Oh, sorry. Okay, so if you have the graphing calculator, you can do the second answer key, which is right above the 0. Okay, if you have a scientific calculator, you still do have the answer key. Oh, yeah. It's above the negative key for the scientific calculators.
Why didn't
I will mimic it, or else it'll take that answer. But yeah, so what I did is I did minus, and then I pushed my second button, and then this would be the answer button right here. So you do 2125 minus second, and then answer. Uh-huh. Well, it'll only give you the same answer if you did your same steps as I did, right? It would only do that if that was your previous answer. Yep, so 2100 cosine of 110. So do the 2100, the cosine of 110. Uh-huh. That's because you don't have the same answer there. So you do 2100 cosine of 110. So you just have to do plus. Okay, and then that's equal to y squared. So what we want to know is y. So then what do we have to do to both sides? We're going to take the square root. Okay, so when you square root both sides, this is another one where you're going to want to use your answer key. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do that. So you would do second and then your square root. And then you can go to second answer, which is right above the negative. And then there you go. And that's how you can keep it from rounding from all the way to the end. Okay, so then your y value, this is a length, so I'm going to round it to the nearest tenth. And so the length of xz is 53.3. Right? Now, a lot of times with how you put this in your calculator, it will follow the order of operation. The reason why I did that step by step with you is because sometimes you are going to have to solve. Okay, so see how if I put that all in, I still get that 2843, and then I could still do the square root of my answer and get that. For some of them, you are going to have to solve, and that's what we're going to do for part B. Okay, so for part B, the first thing I want you to do is I just want you to label what the sides are, and then see if you can write your equation.
I just did the S because there's no hyperlinks. Because there's no hyperlinks. So I just wanted to take the little t. I started doing the opposite and adjacent.
Yeah,
I was like, wait,
yeah, start it off right.
it's an S. It's a cosine S. This is must be S. It was a cosine. So it's like that would this would be that was really bad. I'm so sorry. And then like that's it all and that's the S.
Okay, so your first step was to label. Okay, so when you're labeling, you are going to go across. So if this is T, this is what you're trying to find, right? Right? So then this is little t, here's S, so this is little s, r, and little r. If I'm trying to find T as an angle, which one am I gonna start with? Am I gonna start with S squared, R squared, or T squared? T squared, because remember, whatever the first one is that's gonna match this angle. Okay, the other order doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if you have r squared plus s squared or s squared plus r squared. Okay, and that's because we're doing addition and subtraction, and those are commutative. Doesn't matter which way you add them. Okay, so you could have r squared plus s squared minus 2r times s, and then the cosine of t. Now, if we want to find t, the first thing we want to find is the cosine of t. Okay, so first we're going to solve for cosine of t. Then we're going to use, if we're finding an angle measure, what am I going to use?
Inverse.
The inverse. Okay, so use the inverse cosine to solve for t. Okay, so we'll do the cosine inverse of some value. Okay, so if I'm going to get the cosine of t by itself, okay, think about what steps you're going to want to use to move different things over. We are going to plug in our values, so we know that t squared is 7 squared. We know that r is 11, s is 13, so this would be 11 times 13, cosine of t. So this is where the step-by-step comes in handy. 7 squared is 49, 11 squared is 121. Did you guys know what 13 squared is? Yeah, good, 169. Okay, so then we're going to do 2 times 11 times 13. So 2 times 11 is 22. Okay, let's calculate. Let's do 22 times 13. What'd you guys get? 286. So it'll be 286 cosine of t. Okay, now remember, I said earlier, this is usually where people mess up. You cannot subtract those. Okay, you can add these two together because they don't have any multiplication. So according to the orders of operation, you'd have to multiply before you can add or subtract. And so that's why I can't combine this with any of these. Okay, these aren't multiplied by anything, so I can add them. So let's do this in our head. See how this 1, if you add it to that 9, it's going to make this what? 170. And if you add 20, it would be 190, and then the 100 would be 290. Okay, so if I'm trying to get cosine of t by itself, and I cannot combine these, let's actually write a little note. Do not, bless you, subtract. You need to multiply first according to your order of operations. Right? That's probably one of the mistakes I see the most there. Okay? What you do want to do is keep this and move over to get cosine of t by itself. So what am I going to move over first? 290. Okay? Now, if you had this, let's say I had 49 equals 290 minus 286x. Would you guys subtract those?
No.
Why not?
Because they're two variables.
Yeah, they're not like terms, right? Because one has a variable and one doesn't. That's the same idea with this. That's why I can't subtract them. So if you were going to solve this for x, what would you do first? Minus 290. And then you would divide by negative 286. Okay, so those are the same steps we're gonna do here. We're gonna subtract 290 from each side. Now don't forget this negative. Okay, that's always gonna be negative because you won't have a negative side length, so that'll always be negative here. So 49 minus 290 is gonna be negative 241. And then now you're going to divide. And remember, you're dividing because that's multiplication. Right? That's why you're not adding them. Okay, so then I have the cosine of t equals, really a negative over a negative is a positive over a positive. Okay, so now that I've found the cosine of t, we have to use the inverse to find the angle measure. Okay, so if you do the inverse, the measure of angle t is going to equal the inverse cosine of 241 divided by 286. Okay, so I'm going to do the inverse cosine, of 241 divided by 286. And then remember, we are rounding this to the nearest degree. Yep, the nearest whole number. So it's 32.5, which means this is going to be 33 degrees. So we had 32.5, which is going to round this to 33 degrees. Okay, so for your homework tonight, was your homework on page 555 last night?
Yeah.
Okay, so it'll start on page 555. You're going to do 13 through 15 and 32 through 34 from your textbook. And then on the same worksheet that you have, that 8.5 practice B, you're going to do 16 through 21.